Storytelling is key to engaging your church members and sharing the gospel, but how do you make sure they remember the story you're going to tell? Research shows that active note-taking actually helps your church members better comprehend and understand your message. My Sermon Notes is an interactive note-taking app that allows your church members to take fill-in-the-blank notes of your sermons. Notes are then synced between devices and they're shareable with friends. My Sermon Notes helps you share the story of Christ with your church body. You can sign up today for a 30-day free trial and get 25% off your first year at mysermonnotes.com/churchcom.
Welcome to the Church Communications Podcast, powered by Church Visuals. We believe that effective communication is integral to leading your congregation and community. Join Katie Allred and Carl Barnhill each week to dive into insights and strategies that will help you grow your church. Whether you're a pastor, a church leader, or someone interested in maximizing your communication to make a difference, you're in the right place. Let's get started.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Church Communications Podcast. I am so excited because today we have some really great guests here to tell us more about writing sermons and delivery. But I would first like to say hello to Carl. Hey, Carl.
Hello. So I am so pumped today. Neither one of us are pastors. We've done some speaking, Katie, but
That's true.
But sermon writing and delivery, not our forte.
I have delivered a sermon at a women's conference a couple times, and it's definitely not my thing. That's for sure.
Well, I'm sure you're much better at it than moi, which is why we have the experts on today.
That's why we have experts. So, all right. So talking about that, let's talk about our internationally renowned experts here. All right. So first I want to introduce Matt. So Matt and I go back, Matt Steen here. We go back a while, but Matt works at chemistry staffing, but he also works at Vista Church. So Matt, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
A little bit more about myself. So I am one of the co-founders of Chemistry Staffing, like you said. Served as a youth pastor for 8 years, planted a church in Baltimore, served as executive pastor at a bunch of different churches. My day job is working with chemistry, helping churches find pastors. But I also have a side role where I am serving as one of the pastors at a local church here in Orlando, Florida. And recently, with a vacancy on our church staff, have picked up the majority of the preaching load. So I don't know if that makes me renowned or not. So there might be some disappointed people listening to this. But hey, if the bar is low enough, sure, I'm renowned.
More renowned than me. So, and then Dave, how do you say your last name so I get it right? Is it Ronne?
It's Ronne. Think maca, pepper, risa.
Ah, perfect. Okay, so Dave Ronne.
Yep.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself? Where are you coming from? Where are you in the world?
I have been pastoring I've pastored in 3 different churches, but I've been with 12 Stone Church in Atlanta for the last 28, pushing 29 years now. So been there since early in the ministry and have been a part of the strategic leadership team and a part of the teaching team and the creative arts side and the coaching side. And so I've been doing that for 28 years, I guess. That's why I'm the gray hair. Like if you're not watching this, it's a podcast, you can't tell, but yeah. So
well, there's YouTube. Some people will see.
Well, they might. No need to.
Yeah. Well, okay. So Matt was saying, actually, I originally wanted Matt to just come on the podcast, and he was like, no, you have to have Dave because Dave taught me how to preach. So maybe Matt.
Ironically, Matt was one of our first interns back in the 90s. He was one of my first group of interns we brought in. And I have been involved I've coached virtually every up and coming communicator at 12 Stone over the course of the years. And I was on the teaching team for quite some time. And since then, we're trying to get the church ready and raising up young leaders. And so I've been doing virtually everybody that steps in for the first number of times. I'm the one that's doing the coaching and sermon prep stuff for them. So it's been a passion for a long time. I love good communication and great teaching.
So get us started there, Dave. When you're talking to a new communicator, when someone first comes into the program, what are you looking for, or what are some common things that you've seen over the years?
Well, a couple of the first things I do when I'm talking to a brand new person stepping in, and they've taught. A lot of them had experience teaching in various places, but maybe not at 12 Stone or at a place like our campuses. And, for me, I often go back to just some things, tell me about who your inspirations are. Tell me about who you read. Who do you listen to? This helps me because if they're big, let's just throw out some names. If you're a big Chandler fan, you're going to have a certain bent. If you're a big Furtick fan, you're going to have a certain, because it's a weird time to live. Like back when the earth was a mud ball, when I was growing up, you had to go seek out a few cassette tapes to hear somebody else teach, basically. Mm-hmm. Now you can have that dropped on your phone live in between services and see how somebody else is doing it. And it is really served to influence another generation of communicators, often not for the good, because what they don't do then is really focus on who they are and what their unique skill sets are and how God has wired them to communicate. We're not all wired to communicate the same way. And it's one thing I love. There are a lot of people I admire as teachers, but I'm never going to be a John Piper. That's just not I just can't. So there are limitations that you live with, but there are also gifts that God's given you. So usually we sort of descend into that sort of, talking about what their go-to places are. And that's sort of the start of it. As we get going, that helps me sort of get to know them. And that's really important because, each person is wired a little bit differently. And then I usually walk them through, sort of the prep stuff. What a good community. There's no one way to prep. Never has been, never will be, any more than there's one way to do a quiet time. Sorry to some of my, seminary and Bible instructors.
There's only one way. You have to go outside,
you guys are
nature, stare at nature.
Yeah. You ascribe to the one way
theory.
Be
silent.
Yeah. So I usually talk to them a little bit about just these are some habits. Here are some things that we've seen that are pretty much present in everybody's rhythm and flow in terms of prepping to teach. It's just a matter of how it plays out. And then we'll start going through some of those.
That's good.
So, Matt, what were some major things when you first started with Dave that you picked up along the way that really helped you in your preaching style?
Man, that's a long time ago. I'm not saying Dave's old. I'm saying I'm old.
You're doing better than I am.
No, I think a couple of the discipline and the habit things that he was kind of touching on were some of the things that really, more than anything, I think impacted what it looks like for me. And so, this is just kind of, crazy stuff, but just stuff as simple as, hey, what am I doing on Saturday night? I think, Dave, whether you know that or not, it's something you kind of is, how am I stewarding my energy the night before? What am I doing? What input am I putting into my mind the night before I go and preach? And those are still some things that I do today where I'm guarding Saturday night now. And using Saturday night for prep work and not necessarily going and watching a whole, it makes me sound like I've got no social life, but, I'm not going out and watching movies or that kind of stuff, but I'm trying to kind of steward my energy and protect that evening so that, I'm fresh and ready to go, but I don't have conflicting thoughts going on in my head. I think that's one of the biggest things that I took away from our time together, Dave, but also just kind of knowing, what's the point of what you're doing? That sounds so simple, but it's, at the end of what you're trying to do, what's the desired result? What are you trying to, what do you want people to understand on the other side of that? What do you want them to be? What do you want them to know? What do you want them to do going away? And this is simple stuff, but a lot of times I think we kind of, we forget the basics, right? That block and tackle work we kind of put aside as we get into a rhythm. But those are probably the two biggies. Just if you're asking me what I remember from back in the day,
So on that.
And we still use that today. I mean, I still press what do you want them to know? What do you want them to do? As a simple way to just sort out thoughts, because your head gets filled with so many thoughts. It's hard to just simplify it down. So we do really press in on that a little bit. Not that there's always a do necessarily, but there is at least a response.
Exactly.
Good.
Exactly.
Yeah. So in that framework, what are like the essential elements of like crafting a powerful sermon or like an engaging sermon? How do you get the people to, what do you want them to know and what do you want them to do? How do you get them to do what you would like for them to do?
Is that me or Matt?
I'm letting you go, Dave.
Oh, okay.
I defer.
Well, let me just take you into the horrors of what it means to have to communicate in the church today. Okay,
Sounds great.
You have to know who and how. Who are you communicating to, and how are you going to communicate?
Yeah.
Because the interesting thing about our congregations is there's no one person you're communicating to. I think we all sort of know that intuitively. If you do communications for churches, you know that your audience is so broad and so wide. There's so many different beliefs. There's so many different ways and views of how to look at the world. But we have just sort of developed a bit of a list. It's like, you have to format each teaching in a way that you have enough Bible in there and root it in the truth and in substance. Absolutely. Bottom line, that's the most important thing. No question. However, in doing that, you have to have enough culture in there to keep it sort of personal or practical and relevant to life. It has to be brought into this century. There has to be enough wisdom to challenge the way that people think. I mean, if you're not challenging the way people think, and that's then they don't feel like it's just, okay, that was a nice talk, but if you're challenging the way they think, which takes some time to sort of think about, there has to be probably enough humor in your own way of humor to keep people sort of engaged in the conversation. We say, often if you can make them laugh, you can make them learn. I still believe in that. We can't take ourselves so seriously. I mean, but take God seriously. We can do that. But we're just human beings trying to live out a followership of Jesus, and it's sometimes it's got some laugh to it. I mean, you can laugh at how you have messed up, but you have to speak to unchurched people, right? Because they probably, if they don't have a Bible background, you can't start where you probably would like to start. You have to go back further. You have to speak to unchurched or the once church, the kind that got driven away, that probably have all sorts of hurts and things. You got to speak to fringe people that they think they're Christians, but that's more cultural. You have to speak to the shallow Christian. You have to speak to the third soil Christian that's, they're caught in the weeds. The third soil is the weed. It comes in and they're being choked out. You got to speak to the 30, 60, 100-fold believers, the ones that are bought in, dialed in, walking with Jesus, are going to do something. These are all things. So you have to go deep enough in your prep every week that you could give a 30-second answer for how that applies to those people. And that's one of the ways that we encourage our guys to sort through the who and the how and develop an elevator pitch for each of those categories, I guess, so that you are clearly looking at this scripture. You're clearly looking at this thing that you're going to teach, the what you're going to teach. You're looking at it through the lenses that are sitting in your congregation. That's just us caring. I view that as just loving people. It's caring enough to try to put yourself in their shoes. The old Disney principle is, hey, wear your guest shoes, right? I don't know if they've ever been to their theme parks. It doesn't appear they have been because they're miserable. But wear your guest shoes. They try to make waiting in line fun. I don't know if it is, but for us as communicators, we have to be able to wear our guest shoes. We have to know how people are processing what I'm saying. You can't assume a knowledge base anymore. That has completely changed since I came in to teaching back in the mid '80s.
So, Matt, do you type out your sermon? Do you just do an outline Is it all scripted? How do you kind of frame it?
So this has evolved over the course of my ministry. There was a day when I worked off an outline, but I am a devoted manuscripter now. And the reason for that is I am really good at speaking off the cuff. And this sounds so arrogant. I'm amazing at that. And so if I'm doing like a workshop at a conference, if I do breakout session or something like that, I just use notes and I just go and I shoot off the hip, and it's great and it's fun and it's all that kind of stuff. But when I'm actually preaching,
that's dangerous, because how long can you go?
Oh, totally.
Because he's amazing.
Totally. Yeah, totally. My problem is, and part of this is just my wiring. So I'm an ENFP and I'm a 7 with an 8 wing, right? So I love rabbit trails. And what I've found is that if I don't have a manuscript on Sunday morning, and if I don't have it manuscripted, I will go off rabbit trails. I will say things that are really funny in my head.
Yeah.
But detract from the overall what I'm trying to communicate, or potentially get somebody fired. So I need to have that manuscript, and that's a discipline that I've gotten into over the years, and I think it's probably saved my job and other people's jobs, time and time again. But
so
I'll catch myself, Go ahead.
So is it more, completely manuscript, and then you kind of, where you're going, you have a plan so you can go off plan and get back on the plan?
No, not there. There was a time, and I have learned, and I'm curious Dave's thoughts on this, but I stick to the manuscript now.
Okay.
Because, and part of it is this, I do more prep for preaching than I do anything else that I communicate in any other presentations that I'll do. Right. Yeah. And the study that I put in and the actual work on the keyboard, cranking stuff out, I know how long it's going to take. And I know the stuff that I cut that was really good, but just didn't fit. And so what I've kind of gotten to the point where I need to trust my manuscript, and not listen to the little voice inside my head that says, "Hey, we should do this. It's going to be hilarious." And so I am married to that bad boy. And people, if you want to get inside my head and mess with me on a Sunday morning, grab my manuscript and take it somewhere where I don't see it. It's not a good day. So,
as we've just heard from Pastor Dave, sticking to a manuscript is an effective way to communicate your sermon to church members. But how do you make sure that they're going to remember the story you tell? Research shows that active note-taking actually helps your church members better comprehend and understand your message. My Sermon Notes is an interactive note-taking app that allows your church members to take fill-in-the-blank notes of your sermons. So notes are synced between devices and they're shareable among friends. My Sermon Notes helps you share the story of Christ with your church body. You can sign up today for a 30-day free trial and get 25% off your first year at mysermonnotes.com/churchcom. All right, back to the show. So that's the difference between improv and stand-up comedy, really. Stand-up comedy is very much off a manuscript, whereas improv is off the cuff. And so you're saying, don't let you do improv. You must be a stand-up comedian.
Well, people are giving you an hour and some odd minutes of their time. They're driving there, and they deserve something that's well thought through. So we insist on manuscripts, and the reason for that is it's like 2 Corinthians 10 says, you take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. Well, we look at that so often just in the negative light. Well, I have to stop thinking about this and stop thinking about this. We use that as a way to say, no, if you have eyes to see, ears to hear, you have to be able to take every thought captive, which means when you are preparing a sermon, you're engaged in that same battles. We don't do battle against, principality. We battle against these strongholds. And to do that, we should take the time. We have to steward the privilege well of being entrusted to teach. Now, everybody uses a manuscript differently. Mm-hmm. But what I know is we talk about the 30-second, 3-minute, 30-minute, 3-hour. That's how we talk to people. We tell people, if you've done the manuscript work, what you can do is in 30 seconds in an elevator, you can give them the gist of your teaching, just like that. Not even blink an eye. If you have a little bit more time and you're traveling, on a train somewhere with them, you can in 3 minutes, share with them a good bit of what you're teaching because it's in you. You've written it, you've internalized it. You can do 30 minutes, which is probably what you're going to do when you stand up and teach. But more than that, as pastors, we could do 3 hours. The key to manuscript writing is to eliminate in that 3 hours what people can, what's the old Joe Aldrich, my professor in Multnomah, was so good, man. He's just like, the mind can only assimilate what the seat can endure. So most of us that love the scriptures, we could talk for 3 hours about the subject we're teaching on. Most people can't tolerate that.
I was about to say, that's a theology class.
Yeah, exactly. So, when you're teaching, that's like Matt says, one of the reasons we love the manuscript is it's still got room for, you can side comment here and there, but at least you've really put the time to craft down exactly what you feel like the Lord, this is really the key for us. It's what you feel like the Lord has helped you filter over the course of the week. So these are what I want you to communicate to my people. Yeah. And we're stewarding that.
How far out do you plan? So how far out are you crafting that manuscript to deliver on Sunday?
Never. So in this current season of life for me, so I've got a full-time job that I'm putting in, 50, 60 hours a week. And then theoretically and then I'm preaching. And so I am attempting in my perfect world. I'm working 7 to 10 days out. That's not realistic for everybody, and that's not realistic in this season of life. But in other churches, that's how I was working out. And so, but I'm working personally. I'm working off of a larger plan, right? I know where we're headed over the course of 6, 8, 12 months generally, and I'm kind of getting closer and closer in with detail through it. One of the things that in the churches where I've led that I've tried to kind of instill into the rhythm of the church was we call it a definition of a discipled person. Mm-hmm. What is it that we're looking to build in people? What are those 5 markers of a follower of Jesus in our local context that, if we're doing our job well, this is what we're forming in people. And so, these are things that, for us in Southeast Orlando are going to look a little bit different than, Northeast Atlanta or, somewhere in Arkansas or something like that. Right. But we're answering those questions. And so for us, one of those things in an anxious society is we're looking to form a non-anxious presence in the lives of our people. We're looking to form the discipline of generosity in integrated faith into their day-to-day life. And so we know that
you're saying those things are coming from your context, right? Like they're coming
those are coming from our context, right? What are those things that here really is going to define what a follower of Jesus looks like. Mm-hmm. And so we know that we're going to hit on each of those topics and each of those definitions through the course of the year. It's just going to look differently how we do it. And so always kind of chewing on how we present it, how we do it. But, it's the actual writing work for me. I try 7 to 10 days out. I right now in this season of life, sometimes I'm 3 or 4 but it just kind of depends on rhythm.
Do you work with your communication staff or creative team? How does that relationship work where you're far enough out where they can create a video or create graphics or visuals that go along with your sermon? And if you're at Saturday night, that's probably too late. How do you work that tension?
So from a series standpoint, we're working easily, 6 weeks, 10 weeks out so that the major stuff is handled and taken care of. Right. With our teams, I'm pretty clear. Hey, we're not going to ask you to go above and beyond if I don't have a sermon in your hands by Wednesday. I can't expect, our tech guys to be, pulling all-nighters every Saturday night. That's just unhealthy. Right. And so, I understand that if I'm getting them a sermon on Friday, that I'll get slides, I'll have scripture, maybe a picture, but I'm not having them do last minute crash creative work. That's just unfair, right?
Good.
And so that's how we work. But that said, I'm putting that manuscript in the hands of anybody that's praying ahead of time. I'm putting my manuscript in the hands of anybody that's doing slide decks, our worship guy, all that stuff in our next steps people, because I want them to be able to, any of their comments, to be able to craft it in a way that makes sense, so it doesn't feel like that weird, shifting without a clutch thing during the course of the service. Now, Dave's situation is way more organized than what my life looks like right now. So you guys are probably working, what, 5 days out?
Yeah. Not unlike Matt, we have a pretty good idea where we're going, but not unlike any place else, we run a pretty lean staff, so we have to really, really prioritize what's being worked on when, but we heavily involved because we believe all arts are a gift to communicate. I mean, communication is just an art. I mean, frankly, if you've ever been around a really great communicator, whether they're teachers, preachers, comedians, it's an art form, and all art is given to us as a means to communicate.
Yeah.
And some art takes a little longer than others, so when you're talking production or video shoots or creative design, stuff like that, we try to keep that timeline where we're well, we know the series is coming. We know sort of what the main needs are going to be. So they're already working on the big rocks. Really what they're sorting out in the 2 weeks before, the week before, and the, last few days before is just this progressively smaller and smaller rocks, more accomplishable. We try to give our creative team Fridays off because lots of them are buried into a Saturday, Sunday, some demand there somewhere.
Yeah.
So, we have to structure the front end of our week to be clear. So typically we try to clear the board in terms of any last minute things that would be helpful, and by Tuesday. And by that, we always filter that with, we have to be able to be good stewards of the people that we're working with. So that's where the creative lead or whoever that might be representing those people in that meeting has to be really good at saying, okay, I've tried to just drill this into the people that I've been training up to follow me, is you don't give an answer just then. You say, let me go think about that and I'll get back to you. Because sometimes that idea that may come to the surface on Tuesday is going to cost just way too many man hours. But because you're the creative, it's sort of your role to come back to the person that's asking for something and say, I know you want this. What if we did that?
Yeah.
But lots of times it's like the person asks for it and says, hey, man, I'd really love to have this. And you're like, no, that shouldn't be that. We can do that. So it's Tuesdays. So that's basically our bottom line. If you've got one more thing, but the big rocks have all been worked on for, a period of time before. And like any place, we go through super busy seasons and some seasons that are not, but that's it's creative process is messy. It's the old Orbiting the Giant Hairball, I believe, is the book that I always loved. That just talks about how it's just this impossible thing to unwind and tackle. And there is no one creative process, although I could speak for hours about creative process. So I'll shut up.
That's such a good book. We read that book as a creative team when I worked at a church and really enjoyed it. So that's a good recommendation. That was actually my next question, or kind of our final question before we finish up. Was if you had a book to recommend to either creative communications teams or to even people who are preaching and delivering the sermon, what book would that be?
I'll go with a couple. I honestly, there are a few people that have really affected me creatively and write good material and have continued to write good material. So, there's Orbiting the Giant Hairball or The Purple Cow or some of these old books like that. There's two things that really hit me. One, Todd Henry is a great strategic thinker as it relates to working with creative. So specifically working as a creative and working with creative, virtually anything Todd does, Todd Henry, it's great. He used to be my friend. He was at Crossroads Cincinnati for years as their creative guy, and he's since gone out on his own. That's one. The other one for me that really hit me was, as a creative and as a person that's wired to communicate in a different way, probably than a lot of people. Man, I got this big old book called Think Like Da Vinci. Just messed with me because it has exercises you can do. And lots of times I think we read about stuff as creatives or as creative teams, but you don't go do things. You absorb information. And the very art of creativity is not just absorbing information, it's doing something with it.
It's creative.
Think Like Da Vinci changed the way that I did my sermon prep, my sermon flow, a lot of things like that, because it allowed me to rethink the way I should approach things. So it's taken the lateral, that was the power of lateral thinking was another one that really got me going. So anyhow, that's enough of those. Now, teaching or preaching, man, pick anything written by the big dogs and it's all good. You know what I mean? There are great books out there. But I've really found in terms of teaching and preaching, it's just, I just go back to the classics and the things that move my soul as much as anything. Because, communication it's just heart. It's humor, we always called them what the 4 H's, or was it 5? Yeah, it was heart, Holy Spirit, humor, be human, and then a cheating kind of H, which is the aha. You're always processing through these things. You're looking for your own personal discovery, the aha. You're trying to apply this to yourself as a human being. You're always looking for some kind of humor because life is difficult, and why not? The Holy Spirit has to be wound up into it, and there has to be your heart in this thing. And I don't care how you get to it or how you read it, but for me, the stuff that does that is really just some of the old stuff and the commentaries and that kind of thing. In terms of teaching, I just love to see how other people say things.
Yeah, that's good. Matt, any off the top of your head?
Yeah, I was going to go and say read The Accidental Creative by Todd Henry, but Dave went and stole my thunder on that. I think.
Well, you get 2 votes for it, so that feels like a good, solid suggestion.
Yeah, what I love about that is the idea of the stimuli diet that he introduces, and if we're not intentional about that, I think too few of us read fun stuff and just serious stuff, and just to read good storytellers, to read creative thinkers, that kind of stuff, and then go find offbeat podcasts that tell stories that, a good storyteller. I mean, you sit at the feet of a good storyteller, man, there's so much there.
Yeah. I made that actually a part of my weekly process. You come out of teaching, I'll do the eval with somebody on Sunday. I might do a little eval on Monday morning, but after that, I just left the building. I went, and that was back in we still have bookstores here. You could go pick up there and just let something come into my mind that is completely lateral, completely out of anything I'm having to deal with currently, so that I'm feeding in that stimuli. That was a Todd Henry thing. That was a Think Like Da Vinci thing. Really love that. And then the work in earnest on a message really started to take place sometime Monday afternoon or evening, and then Tuesday all day. Was trying to really zero in on that after all the staff meetings, right? Yeah. So Wednesday was the right day. Thursday was often a day off. Friday was nail the final right. Saturday was pray and practice. It's sort of, everybody's got to find their rhythm.
Okay, so the final question as we're concluding: if people want to get connected with you, learn more about you, maybe get involved in your program, Dave, how do they do that?
Well, they can just contact me at Chemistry Staffing. I mean, I've got a link there that they can schedule with and talk to me with. They can drop a note to me at 12 Stone. I'm probably still on there somewhere, haven't been to the website in a while. But that is the best way to do it. Is the best way to get there. But Chemistry Staffing is probably easy to remember, so you just have to scroll way down to find me. I'm probably buried somewhere down there.
All right, Matt, how do people find you?
Same thing. Matt.Steen at chemistrystaffing.com.
Okay, great.
And yeah, we'll share some links to get on our calendar with you guys, so you can put it in the show notes.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, and you
Well,
can do something similar. I mean, if you just want to go simple, you put Dave and Ronne, Ronne, and a Gmail. I'm good to go. Just send it to me.
Well, there you go.
That's simple. It's personal. It's just it's an account I use just to collect stuff. So if people want to reach out, that's a simple way to do it too.
That's awesome. All right. Well, thanks both of you for being here. We appreciate it so much.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Thank you,
Anytime.
guys.
Thanks for joining us for the Church Communications Podcast. To learn more and get more resources for your church, visit churchcommunications.com.